Welcome to the Journey Authentically podcast. I'm Cody Baker. I am the co-founder of Journey Authentically, which is a nonprofit that works with grieving men. This is a place for real talk about the hardest journey in life, and that's grief. No platitudes, no timelines, no expectations, no pressure. It's just a place to have honest conversation about grief and healing and finding your way forward. For this first episode, I want to tell you why this podcast and why Journey Authentically exists. I want to tell you my story, and not because it's special or unique, but because maybe parts of it will sound familiar to you. And if they do, I want you to just know that you're not alone in it. And that's a big part of Journey Authentically is knowing that you're not alone on the journey of grief, but also just the journey of life. And so kind of what my experience has been with grief is actually throughout my life, I've had grief and death at certain points of my life. And up until my daughter was stillborn, which was about 7 years ago, I didn't really know how to deal with grief or really what that entailed. And so all of a sudden, when my daughter died, I didn't really have a framework or conceptualize grief. It was kind of just this mentality of just keep moving forward. And I didn't really process any of it. I didn't really think about much of it. And I really let kind of this societal influence of what grief is. So I really didn't have a way to deal with grief. I just thought it was something that was kind of a blip in the point of life, and you worked through it and you moved on, and that was kind of it. And so when that all changed, the moment that all changed was when my daughter died, and I didn't have an idea of how to work through this tragedy for me and my family. And so all of a sudden it left me just kind of grasping for things. And so I did that for a while. And then a couple years later, it kind of all hit me of, you're not dealing with this. You're not doing what you need to do to be healthy, to process what happened. And so it started coming out in a lot of different ways. And some of that was not eating healthy. Some of that was not sleeping that well. I know some people struggle with sleep when they're grieving or when something's going on. I'm kind of the opposite. It wears me down so much that I can fall asleep. I just get poor sleep. And then I have poor energy throughout the day. Again, I kind of gained a lot of weight. I was having bad coping mechanisms. And so I was just really trying to mask the grief. And it got to a very low point. And I think the aha moment, I guess, was when I'm sitting in my counselor's office with my wife, and just at this really low point, trying to say that I was okay. And I had these two people that cared for me and cared for my well-being saying, you're not okay. And what do you need to get back to a place where you're healthy again? And, that question stunned me, and I didn't know the answer. I didn't know what I needed. And because I was just kind of going and going and going. And so through that, I realized I was isolating myself a lot. And I was isolating myself as a father who's grieving, as a father and a husband that didn't have answers, that felt like he failed in a lot of ways. And so the isolation kind of perpetuated a lot of these feelings. And a few of them was, the expectation to just be strong and to essentially, gut it out. Um, and I think there's a time and a place for that. But I think grieving is not always the time and place for that. And so, I was just trying to say, if I make it to this point, it will be okay. If I can just bear down and get done, everything will be fine. And I think that expectation is there for men a lot of like, hey, just be the rock, be the one that people can lean on. And I definitely took that to heart and said, hey, I'm going to be the one that my wife can lean on, that other people can lean on, that my living daughter can lean on. And I'm just not going to deal with my shit. And I'm going to be that strong person that I think everybody needs in this moment. And I think there are two things that kind of solidified, that idea in my head. And again, this is my experience. It's not everybody's experience, especially when you lose a child early on, like I did. The conversation is usually geared towards the wife. How is she doing? How is, her body recovering? How is all of this? And the questions, rightly so, were geared toward her. But not a lot of questions were geared toward me of how am I doing? Essentially my wife and I both lost a child, and we're both working through what that means and what that looks like. But I think with her physical symptoms, people were asking her a lot. And so I think internally I was like, well, if nobody's asking me how I'm doing, I should be fine. Like, it was kind of like this like subtle like hint of, yeah, you just keep going. And so that's what I'm doing. And so grief hit me in a lot of interesting ways. And some were physical symptoms, some were not sleeping that well, sometimes eating too much, drinking too much. I gained a lot of weight during that period of time. I know some people lose weight under stress and anxiety. I tend to gain weight. Sleeping poorly, I was eating poorly. I wasn't exercising really, wasn't getting outside, wasn't doing all these things. And so I think essentially I was feeling my grief in a lot of different ways. And to be honest, all that did was make me miss what was actually going on. I would look at a symptom and say, oh man, I just didn't get the right amount of sleep last night, which that can be true. But a lot of the behind the scenes was I just wasn't dealing with my grief. And so I had all these symptoms from not dealing with my grief, and I'd only look at the symptom and not the whole picture. So I was dealing with all these things, and along with the emotional waves that would come and go and hit me at random times. Sometimes I wouldn't even expect it, and something would trigger my emotions. And it was just kind of a chaotic period of time because I didn't know what to expect, but I knew how I should be acting, or I thought I knew how I should be acting. So, I'd have these emotional waves. I spent a lot of time just kind of in like a brain fog of going through the motions and not totally being present. And I was doing that a lot. And I was doing that at work. I was doing that at home. But I think all for the sake of just trying to get to the next day. And some of that was triggered by, I went back to work really early on for a host of reasons. I just didn't have the time off. And so I went back to work right away. And I think that added to the fog, added to me distancing myself from the grief. And so there was that fog. And I think to that, I was feeling so much in my body that I was just ignoring, or that I was trying to mask, to be honest. Like, I was just trying to have something feel okay. And so I had a lot of bad coping mechanisms. And I think sometimes we think that grief or certain things are just mental, and they're just all up in our head. But for me, I felt a lot of grief in my body. And again, not paying attention to it and saying it's other things. But, I had all these symptoms and all these ways that grief was showing up in my life. And I think that was one thing that I wish somebody would have told me about. It's like, hey, you're not gonna just feel grief by crying. You're gonna feel grief in these different ways, and it could show up in these different ways. And maybe later on we'll talk about the neuroscience behind grief, but there's a lot going on with our body internally in our mind that shows up, that if we don't know what's going on and how to deal with it, then I think we just push it off to the side. And really what I wish a lot is, like I just mentioned, that it was just being talked about more. That I would have had access to someone or somebody saying, hey, these are the things that could go on with grief. These are some byproducts of grief. These are some struggles. And because of that, I found myself isolating so much because I felt so out of place. I felt so alone in this journey because I just thought something was wrong with me, that I was taking this too hard, or that I should be over this by now. Just all these things that were going on inside of my head and trying to work through them, but then also not seeing outside of myself any of that going on. So I just isolate and hide. And, some of that isolation was, watching sports or watching TV or, just not wanting to engage socially with people. And another aspect of that is like, I had men in my life, and I think we generally talked about it maybe as this like big scale of what grief might look like, or maybe couched in spirituality or religion, and not like directly talking about how grief was impacting me. And again, felt very isolating. And a lot of what I was able to talk to men about was not my deep sadness or what I was struggling with mentally. It was kind of almost in this joking, like, oh, I'm just not coping that well with it. Talking about how much we drank, or talking about other poor coping mechanisms that we picked up. And instead of talking about the why that we were doing it, we were just talking about these things that we were doing. And I wish that I had that within my experience of grief. Once that disconnect started to happen, again, I felt like I started to isolate more. And then it becomes this very, I think, bad cycle of isolation, feeling lonely, knowing what you need, but then kind of doubling back on being alone and isolating. And for me, the idea is like, oh, I can figure this out. I can get myself out of this. And so not knowing where to go, all of a sudden I would double back down and be like, okay, I got this. I'll figure it out. And then I tended to distance myself even more because I felt like just off. I didn't feel myself. And so I didn't think I could present what people thought I should be or needed to be. And so I'm like, well, if I can't be that in front of people, or they're going to criticize me, then fine, I'm just not going to do it. And so like that was just a really, really hard cycle for me. And then I think the pressure of work of like, okay, just keep going. You got this. Like kind of that, like, yeah, we believe in you. I know this is hard, but you can do it. And so while I think encouragement in like, hey, we can work through hard things is important, I didn't have anybody being like, this is a lot. Maybe you should take a day. maybe you shouldn't be here, or maybe this, maybe that. And maybe people were saying that, and I was just so lost in my own mind that I could not hear it or feel it. But it just built this pressure at work and at home, and I was just dying inside, just dying inside. And the expectation that I felt, again, it's what I felt. So it's okay. Like, what I felt was like, you shouldn't be dying inside. You should be okay. All these things that people say that just seem to build up the wrong thing and are the wrong thing inside of me. And so I was just drowning and with the expectation that I should be swimming and I should be fine, was just brutal for me. And so what I wish, and again, it's a hard balance. What I wish I knew of things that I know now, and and what I had back then was a lot of resources for women. And it goes back to the idea of how was my wife doing? There are all these books, all these things geared towards my wife and women and how they grieve and what they're going through. And not a lot was geared toward men. And kind of ironically, even stuff that would I'd come across that was for men was written by women. And not even saying that that's bad, but I think the voice within it was like from the female perspective a little bit. And so like I was just yearning for things to connect with on the male perspective or the male side. Again, we all grieve differently. So we all can connect in different ways and connect to certain things, but that's what I was like just longing for. And my wife and I would do groups and we would do different things, and maybe the spouse just shows up. The female partner would show up and the male would stay home, or all these things. All of a sudden I would find myself in rooms with mostly women, or even if there were men there, the conversation was dominated by females. And again, I'm not trying to stereotype or perpetuate anything, but that was my experience. And so I wasn't seeing like men openly grieve or talk about their grieving process. And not only that, but like the longevity of it. Like, I think there were like moments that, oh yeah, this was hard, and then I got through it. It wasn't like this, this was hard, and this has been, the months or years that I've processed this or been going through that. And so I wanted to hear from men, and I wanted to hear partially of like, I think I knew I'd be okay. I think I wanted to hear that it's okay to take a break. It's okay to think about yourself. It's okay to call out of work and say, I just don't got it today. And then once you do that, it's okay to not be productive, to watch a movie or go for a walk or, do the things that help rejuvenate you. And that's what I kind of missed. I missed that focus of like, how do I be healthy and grieve at the same time? And then I just wanted a community around that. Feeling alone, I think that is like something that we we desire is like community, even though I probably would not have said that in the midst of it. But, having a group of men that were open and honest, I think would have gone a long way for a process. That ultimately started Journey Authentically. And years after my daughter died, going through all these things, realizing what I needed and feeling like maybe there's a gap out there, but just wanting to have men have a place to go, to not feel alone, to journey together openly and honestly about life and their grief and hardship and just all the things that I think sometimes as we get older we isolate and we try and do these things on our own. And so that was kind of the undertone of it. And then through my process of grieving, I started paying attention to what I enjoyed and what brought healing and what brought peace and what were healthy coping mechanisms. And so a lot of that is outside for me. It's going on hikes, it's fishing, it's playing golf with a group of guys, it's skiing, it's, all these things about being outside, being in nature, somewhat creating space, quiet, where you're just listening to nature, maybe yourself, but, allowing that space and time to process what's going on. And so that's a lot of what Journey Authentically is trying to do. It's trying to create this community, but also create time and space for men to process and grieve and figure out what that means for themselves. And I think there's a lot of formulas in the world of this is what it looks like. This is what you need to do. Sometimes those formulas work. Sometimes they don't. But grief, I feel like we all grieve differently. We all go through the process differently. And so it's figuring out what that process looks like to you. And that was a huge piece of like, I don't have to replicate. I have to find what works for me. And so creating that space for men where they can let their walls down, be unguarded, be themselves, be authentic with what they're doing or how they're feeling, and in that day, in that moment, and move forward with that. And so I think Journey Authentically also is like building that community and having resources. I didn't just want it to be resources. I wanted it to be community. I wanted it to be like pushing men to find themselves in the midst of their grief. And so that's a snapshot of everything very, very quickly, of myself, of Journey Authentically. And then I think for this podcast, what I'm hoping is it's just another avenue for men to hear other men have conversations about grief, about life, about what maybe some resources, what's helped them, what didn't help them. And it's just a place where you can tune into. And that was one thing that I enjoyed too, is listening to podcasts and being like, oh man, I felt that, or I needed to hear that. And so I hope this is part of that for people. And so it's going to be a mix of solo episodes of me sharing my thoughts, reflections, something I learned along the way, or passing on some resources or some reflections on resources, but then hopefully as well some interviews with other grievers and experts and people that know this field and grieving. And then, it's just real conversations. And grief can get messy, and it can get messy internally with just ourselves. It can get messy with friends. It can get messy with partners if we have partners. And so grief has a way of, I think, just bubbling a lot to the surface. And so how do we how do we have conversations about it? How do we work with it? And so I think a lot of it is, just navigating that and not navigating it alone. Journey authentically, no pressure to heal, to grow. It's come as you are that day. And if that day is shit, great. Love to have a conversation. Love to talk about it. If you're having a good day, great. Talk about it. What's making it a good day? I think we can, with an open mind, we can meet each other exactly where we are. And so there's no pressure to be good. There's no pressure to be bad or sad. I think sometimes that dynamic exists is like, hey, I'm actually doing good today. Should I show up to a group that most people are going to be sad? Or, that dynamic, show up as you are, be who you are. And because that could change the next day. And maybe, the next time it's like, I need the support. So come as you are. And then we'll just be talking about, topics, and topics will change, but, navigating relationships while grieving, holidays, different types of loss, how men process loss, maybe a little bit differently, finding purpose after loss. I think that's an interesting one. And then just supporting each other, being there for each other. And so, I think it's a big net. And I think that's why the podcast is Journey Authentically. It's like, we're journeying through life together. But, if you're a grieving man that just wants real conversation, real ideas, real questions, this is for you. If you're feeling alone, if you're feeling isolated, this is for you. Maybe if you're supporting a grieving man, this is for you. And you want to understand maybe what the process is going on the other side of the table. Come listen to some conversations. Maybe you'll get some insights. And again, the spectrum of grief, if you're early on, I think this is for you. If it's been years and years, I think it's for you too. Because I think what I like to call grieving is this ongoing process. And so it's not just, well, it's been a few years, so I'm not really there. Or I think we are. We hold people that we love, I think, forever. And so whether your day's out or years out, I think this podcast is for you as well. If what I've shared today resonates with you, I just want you to know you're not alone. Journey Authentically isn't just a podcast. We have support groups, in-person events, online community where men can connect. And it's just about being real, and being real with what we're carrying in the moment. So don't be scared to reach out. You can find us at journeyauthentically.com or journeyauthentically.community. And we're there. There's an online community. You can find events there. You can find resources in those places. And if you don't know what you need, like I did most of the time, you can just reach out. Say, hey, I don't know. I just feel alone, and we're here for you. And so again, sometimes the hardest step is the first step. If you're listening to this, great first step. Keep taking those steps, and we're here to journey with you. And so after every, or at the end of every podcast, I kind of want to just do a recommendation, and it's more maybe of an insight of what I have found in the world that I think, hey, maybe a guy might like or need to know about. So this one, very basic recommendation, but I think just keeping it simple and being like, hey, health starts at the very foundational level of making sure you're drinking enough water, making sure you're eating somewhat healthy. I think sometimes when we are in the midst of grief, we kind of forget the basics. We forget to drink that water before the 5 cups of coffee. Drink your water first thing in the morning, drink it throughout the day, stay hydrated, eat well, and see how that impacts your grieving, and knowing that like one big step or one small step, I think, builds on each other. So gotta start at the basic, build. And so that's my recommendation for today, is stay hydrated. And then next episodes, we'll just be posting. And so look out for the next episode. Until next time, give yourself the permission to feel whatever comes. Don't judge it. Don't think I shouldn't be feeling that. Just let it come and see what happens.